Today on Upfront, Wisconsin has its first new Chief Justice in almost 2 decades. Next, how Pat Roggensack plans to change the tone of the court, and is it really in turmoil as another justice claims? Then, an emerging plan to turn around some troubled Milwaukee schools. Superintendent Darian Driver on why the district is not embracing the plan. Plus,
we're not talking to the president.
No questions, please. Veteran journalist Ann Compton on the changing relationship between the candidates for president and the media.
Covering the issues important to Wisconsin. This is Upfront with Mike Goucher.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Upfront. In April, Wisconsin voters said they wanted a change in the way the leader of the state Supreme Court was selected. Well, they got it. But the first steps in implementing that change have been bumpy, and the court is again making headlines. Last month, voters approved a constitutional amendment allowing the justices to choose their own Chief Justice instead of the chief automatically being the longest-serving member of the court. Soon after the results were certified, 4 members of the court voted by email to name Justice Pat Roggensack the Chief Justice. But former Chief Shirley Abrahamson filed a federal lawsuit to block the change. She says she's still the chief until her term expires in 2019. And last week, Justice Pat Crook said in a letter to the federal court that the state Supreme Court is now in a state of uncertainty and turmoil and asked the federal court for a transition plan. But the judge handling the case ruled Friday that Roggensack can remain Chief Justice until the lawsuit is decided. In her own affidavit, Roggensack denied there was new turmoil on the court. She has pledged to change the tone of the state's high court and restore its reputation. And Chief Justice Pat Roggensack joins us now on Upfront. Thanks very much for being with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Well, I know you don't want to talk about the merits of the lawsuit, of Justice Abrahamson's lawsuit, but let me ask you about these claims that the court is in a state of upheaval, that it's chaotic, there's uncertainty going on. What do you have to say to that?
You know, I just think that that doesn't represent the facts of what are really going on every day. I took over as Chief Justice on May 1st, so I've been the chief for about 2 weeks. During that period of time, I've had personal interviews with all of our management staff, telling them that this is a team effort for us to go forward together and that I needed their assistance, their support, and their advice. And they uniformly have been welcoming of me. They don't feel chaotic. We've proceeded in a very regular fashion. I've attended the meetings that are chaired by the Chief Justice. I've worked with all of our staff, all of our managers. So there's no chaos on the court. We're working just fine. Our opinions are coming out regularly. And in fact, we're getting more opinions out now than we did last year by an amazing amount. So things are moving forward fine.
Let me ask you a follow-up to that. In the affidavit that Justice Bradley submitted, she talked about you attempting to assert your new authority in a big way, in an early way, removing nameplates, trying to move into a new office, things of that nature. Is that just completely not true?
Well, Justice Bradley has made up a few facts. First of all, I've never asked Justice Abrahamson to move out of her space. I know this transition is going to be hard for her. I have absolutely no interest in making it any harder for her than it needs to be. But I am the Chief Justice, and so I assert the authority of the Chief Justice, and that includes having my name on the website, having my name on the bench, labeled the Chief Justice, having my name as Chief Justice on the opinions that go out the door. I mean, I have a constitutional obligation to fulfill the tasks that my office require, and I am going about doing that.
I sense you're saying that you don't feel like you've done anything inappropriate in terms of since this change has occurred.
No. And you know, the Chief Justice in the past can select whichever office he or she wants. I don't need Chief Justice Abrahamson's, former Chief Justice Abrahamson's office. I don't want to make it harder for her than necessary, so I am in the office that I've had since 2003. It suits me just fine, and I am able to operate very effectively and efficiently out of that office.
In 2020 hindsight, anything you would have done differently in these first couple of weeks? For instance, some people look at the vote to select you as Chief Justice. It was done by email.
Right.
Do you wish that had been done in a more public setting or in a meeting of the justices?
You know, you really can't have a meeting of 7 people to decide how you're going to implement a new Chief Justice when one of the 7 is suing you all not to do it. So, you know, we're going to have a review of who will be the Chief Justice every 2 years. We're going to have an election every 2 years. As the matter progresses, when we decide in 2 years to look at who we're going to have for the beginning of the next 2-year term, it'll be easy to do a number of ways. But because the Chief Justice Abrahamson, in that capacity before I took over, filed a lawsuit trying to attempt to keep us from realizing the will of the voters, 53% of the people that voted, there really wasn't any other way of doing it other than what we did. So it was orderly, it was with full notice, everyone had an opportunity to participate equally. The next time, there'll probably be a different way of doing it. And we all knew that this transition would be a bit bumpy in regard to Justice Abrahamson's feelings, and we've tried to take account of that. But, you know, we have an obligation to fulfill, an obligation to the people that voted to change the Constitution. And the Constitution, once we got certification from the Government Accountability Board, well, that new constitutional provision was in effect. Well, the provision that Justice Abrahamson operated under as the Chief Justice ceased to exist, okay? So there wasn't any constitutional provision that would permit someone who'd been there the longest to be the Chief Justice. What the Constitution said is that the majority of those sitting on the court should elect a Chief Justice. So at that point, we had no Chief Justice. Okay, so we needed to move forward. Once the Government Accountability Board certified the change, you know, the court's work has to go forward.
Help me understand how the public will have a different impression of the court. You said you want to restore its reputation. How do you do that with the public?
Well, you know, it's bumpy right now, but it will settle down, okay? It will settle down. And I want to put a more positive view of the court out than has been put out in the past. For example, the Wisconsin Supreme Court is cited by Supreme Courts all across the country as an excellent court because of the merits of the reasoning that underlie its decisions. Well, you know, that's not something that you read about in the paper. The Wisconsin Supreme Court has a wonderful program where we train and certify court interpreters. So anybody that comes in our court is going to have the proceedings conducted in a way that they can understand and participate in. Bet you don't read about that much in the paper. We have a commission called Access to Justice Commission, which is part of the Supreme Court, where this commission tries to figure out and facilitate representation for poor people who have civil problems. You know, if you're in a criminal lawsuit, you have a constitutional right to representation, but you don't have that in a civil matter. So we do a lot of wonderful things, and so what I want to do is to get out so the public knows some of these things that we are doing. We have a fine court, and it does have a fine reputation for the merits and the reasoning and the scholarship of its decisions.
And very briefly, about 15 seconds left, you're all able to work together. You feel that you can all work together.
Yes, and you know what? One other thing that I'm doing that I want you to know about. In the past, the leadership of the court has been that everything had to go through the Chief Justice. Well, that's one way of being the Chief Justice. It's not the only way, and what I am going to be doing is I'm going to be involving all 7 justices in parts of the court's administration in a way they've never had the opportunity to participate before. They will have different tasks than they've had before, and I think it's going to give a different face to the court. A more consensus type of leadership is what I'm looking forward to. So when we get through this bumpy part, I am confident that we can all work together and serve the people of Wisconsin more effectively than we ever have in the past.
Chief Justice Pat Roggensack, we appreciate your time. Thanks very much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Coming up next, the new plan for some failing Milwaukee public schools, putting some under the control of the county executive. I'll talk about it with MPS Superintendent Darian Driver when Up Front continues.
Up Front with Mike Goucher, brought to you by the American Transmission Company.